There was a dock, an actual wooden dock bolted into my waterfront when I got back from a 3-week work trip. Not a small one either. I'm talking about a 30-foot eyesore stretching from my lawn straight into the lake I'd paid a premium to live on. And the best part? It wasn't mine. My name is Mason Holt. I bought my retirement home 2 years ago, after 26 years as a civil engineer. Quiet lakeside property. No kids. One dog named Diesel. Nearest neighbor a quarter-mile down the road. Or at least it used to be quiet, until Cedarwood Pines HOA got a new president. Enter Diane Hargrove. Mid-50s. Bleached highlights. Oversized sunglasses. And a voice that could curdle milk from 50 yards. She got elected while I was traveling last fall. And from the moment she took that gavel, she ran the community like she owned it personally. First, it was mailbox color codes. Then came the lawn length inspections. Then a mandatory landscape aesthetic guide that was 12 pages long and referenced HOA standards from a county that didn't even exist. And now this, a full dock, unauthorized, sitting right off my backyard. I knocked on Diane's door the day I returned. She was watering her fake succulents on the front porch like she'd been expecting me. "Diane," I said, keeping my voice even. "There's a dock built on my property." She tilted her head like I'd said something adorable. "It's a community amenity, Mason. The board approved the project. Your board can't vote to build on land they don't own." "Oh, don't get technical," she said, waving me off. "The funds were already allocated. You were gone, and we needed to move forward." I took a slow breath. "You've got 72 hours to remove it. After that, I take it down myself." She smiled. "Touch it, and you'll be fined for destruction of HOA property." I didn't say another word. I just turned around and walked back to my house. But I wasn't bluffing. Back inside, I dug out the original plat map from my sale documents. It was clear as day. The shoreline and 10 feet into the water were private property. My private property. And my outdoor cameras had caught everything. A hired crew hauling lumber and equipment onto my land in broad daylight, not a permit in sight. The next morning I called the county zoning office. The clerk confirmed it. No construction permit had been filed for the site. Not only was the HOA trespassing, they'd violated at least 3 zoning ordinances. And Diane was listed as the project initiator on every relevant document. That was exactly what I needed. 3 days later, I grabbed my tools. Cordless drill, crowbar, heavy gloves. I dismantled that dock plank by plank, methodical and deliberate. A few neighbors watched from their yards. A couple gave me a slow nod. I loaded the lumber onto my trailer and parked it right in the driveway. That's when Diane came storming across the lawn. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped. "Cleaning up," I said, pointing to the survey flags I'd just restaked along my property line. "You built a dock on my land without permission. That's illegal dumping. I removed it." "You're welcome. You'll be hearing from our attorney." "Good," I said. "He can explain what trespassing and unauthorized construction mean." She stood there, red-faced, fists clenched, mouth open. I stepped past her and went inside. But I wasn't close to done. The next morning I woke up to a car idling outside. An unmarked white SUV with tinted windows and a magnetic decal on the door. Cedarwood Pines Compliance Division. A man in khakis and a polo was circling my truck and trailer with a clipboard, crouching to photograph the stacked wood. He slapped an orange violation notice on my mailbox and drove off. I walked out and read it. The paper was formatted like an official citation, but it was clearly homemade HOA letterhead, amateur design. The violation: unauthorized possession of HOA construction materials. Fine, $500, due in 5 days. I walked it straight to the fire pit behind my shed. That afternoon, I was at the county courthouse filing for illegal construction and environmental disruption. The clerk raised her eyebrows when I laid out the photos and plat map. She made a few calls, and within 20 minutes I was sitting across from a zoning enforcement officer named Sandra Reyes. "They built this without a permit and without your consent?" she asked. "Didn't even leave a note," I said. "I came home and it was just sitting there like it had always been." Sandra leaned back in her chair. "We've had complaints about Cedarwood Pines before, usually small things. But this is different. That lake is part of a protected watershed. You can't drive pilings into the shoreline without an EPA permit. I handed her a flash drive with the security footage. She watched it for a few minutes, then nodded. This will do. I'm opening a code enforcement investigation. Do I have your permission to involve law enforcement if the property violation is confirmed? You do, I said. She looked up. Prepare for pushback. HOAs like this don't go down quietly. I'm not asking them to go down, I said. Just to back off what doesn't belong to them. By afternoon, word had spread. More neighbors were walking their dogs past my house than usual, all slowing down to stare at the trailer full of dismantled lumber. I let them stare. That evening, an unsigned letter arrived, hand-delivered, sealed envelope. Typed, formal, clipped. Mr. Holt, your recent actions have drawn unnecessary attention to the community and may result in property devaluation. We strongly urge you to return the materials and issue a formal apology to avoid further escalation. I read it twice, then filed it in a folder I'd labeled HOA nonsense. Something told me I'd need it. The next day, Sandra returned with a sheriff's deputy and a licensed surveyor. They walked the shoreline, drove fresh stakes, took official measurements and photographs. When the deputy finished, he asked if I wanted to press charges for trespassing. I paused. Not yet. Let's see how they respond. That afternoon, Diane showed up again, flanked this time by 2 board members, a heavy-set man in his 60s with a cane, and a younger woman carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation in the mirror. They stopped 2 feet from the newly staked boundary line. We're here to negotiate, Diane announced. Then stay on your side of the line, I said from the porch. The man with the cane held up a document. We're offering a compromise. Return the materials. We relocate the dock to the other end of the lake. No hard feelings. You think I took it for fun? I said. You dumped thousands of dollars of illegal construction on my private property. I'm keeping it as compensation for the cleanup. That's theft, the woman with the clipboard said. I pointed to the deputy's photos taped to my garage door. That's evidence. The county's already investigating. Diane narrowed her eyes. Paperwork doesn't scare us. We have legal counsel. Then use them, I said. They left without another word. That night, my phone rang an unfamiliar number. Mr. Holt? This is Officer Martinez, State Environmental Agency. We've received a forwarded complaint regarding unauthorized shoreline modification at your address. Did you authorize the dock construction? I didn't even know it existed until I got home, I said. We're sending an investigator to assess the damage. If the construction was unauthorized, the HOA could be facing civil penalties and environmental fines. I'll be home all week, I said. 2 days later, a black SUV with state plates pulled up. A woman in a windbreaker stepped out and introduced herself as Agent Torres. She spent over an hour measuring post holes and documenting disturbance along the waterline. When she finished, she handed me her card. This is going to get messy, she said. But you're in the right. If they used treated lumber or disturbed protected vegetation, they're looking at multiple regulatory violations. They never asked, I said. They just assumed they could take whatever space they wanted. That's not how it works, she said. Not anymore. On the 3rd day, Diane escalated. A tow truck rolled up at dawn and tried to hook my trailer. I stepped outside just as the driver reached for the hitch. You have a removal order? I called out. He looked confused. HOA said this was illegally dumped equipment, told me to haul it. I pointed to the survey flags. That trailer is sitting on private property. You touch it, I file for theft and trespass. He hesitated, made a call, then quietly backed off and drove away. I filed a police report that afternoon, attempted theft, with doorbell camera footage attached. Later that week, a man in a gray suit arrived at my door with a leather briefcase. I represent the HOA's legal counsel, he said politely but firmly. My clients are prepared to drop the fine and file a mutual release of claims if you return the materials and agree not to pursue further action. I leaned against the doorframe. And what do I get when they try to take something else next month? He adjusted his tie. You risk a civil suit for unlawful possession of property. You're welcome to file it, I said. But you might want to advise your clients first. The EPA and the county zoning board are both investigating. I don't think a judge is going to side with a group that built a dock on land they didn't own, then tried to steal it back. He didn't respond. He closed his briefcase and left. That night, Sandra emailed me. The county had issued a stop work order on all HOA construction pending investigation. The state environmental agency had issued a compliance hearing notice with Diane, named directly as the responsible party. And a neighbor I'd never spoken to, a retired federal judge named Gerald Whitmore, knocked on my door with a six-pack and a grin. "I've been waiting 2 years for someone to stand up to that woman," he said, dropping into a chair on my porch. "Mind if I help you draft your counterclaim?" "Be my guest," I said. "We've got plenty of material." The following Monday, the real storm arrived. I was replacing a cracked step on my back deck when a white sedan pulled up. 2 men stepped out, one in a navy windbreaker with a gold badge clipped to the chest, the other in business casual carrying a clipboard. "Detective Briggs, County Property Crimes Division," the first one said. "This is Investigator Cole from the State Auditor's Office." I wiped my hands. "What brings you out here?" Cole flipped open the clipboard. "We've been reviewing financial documents from Cedarwood Pines HOA. Your situation triggered a deeper audit." "Come inside," I said. Diesel circled them cautiously, sniffed their shoes, then settled near the fireplace. Cole spread a map across the coffee table and tapped a red dot over my lot. "This is what the HOA submitted to the county as part of a capital improvement request. It labels your shoreline as a common access reserve, a designation that doesn't exist anywhere in the original plat." "I have the deed," I said. "It's not common anything." "We've confirmed that," Briggs said. "The problem is, they attached this fabricated map to a funding request that unlocked nearly $32,000 from the HOA Reserve Fund. That money was then paid to a contractor, Lakeview Shoreline Services." "Never heard of them," I said. Cole pulled out a printout. "They're a real company, but the payment never reached their business account. It was rerouted through a shell company registered just 14 months ago to someone named Patricia Hargrove." I looked up. "Diane's sister." "Correct. The contractor who actually built the dock wasn't licensed. He was subcontracted off the books. The materials were unapproved. Permits were non-existent, and the funds used were misappropriated from the HOA's contingency account." Briggs met my eyes. "That's felony fraud. At minimum 2 counts. Possibly more, depending on what we find in the board communications." I exhaled slowly. "What do you need from me?" "A formal statement covering the dock, the property line, and your interactions with the board. Access to your security footage and all correspondence." "You'll have everything tonight," I said. They left with copies of the camera footage, the plat map, and every email and letter I'd received. Less than 2 hours later, I got a text from Gerald. 2 words: "Turn on Channel 9." The segment was already underway when I clicked over. A reporter stood in front of the Cedarwood Pines community entrance, a headline scrolling beneath her: "Local HOA, under state investigation for financial misconduct." Drone footage swept over the lake, zooming in on my freshly staked shoreline. Then, it cut to Diane outside her house, a reporter closing in with a microphone. She slammed the door in his face. "Sources indicate," the anchor said, "that the HOA president is being investigated in connection with falsified documents and the misuse of homeowner funds. The state auditor's office confirmed a criminal inquiry is underway." My phone rang all night. Neighbors who'd stayed silent for months called to apologize. The Callahans from 3 houses down showed up with a pie and the energy of people who were done sitting on their hands. I added their names to a growing list. By Wednesday, the HOA office, a rented trailer near the front gate, was shuttered. Sign on the door: "Closed until further notice." The real revelation came Friday. A manila envelope arrived by certified mail. Inside was a packet of internal HOA emails, unsigned but clearly leaked. Board members had discussed backdating permits, fabricating community use designations, and pressuring the contractor to stay quiet. One email referenced me by name. "Holt's out of town another 10 days. We can have it done before he's back. If he makes noise, we'll fine him for obstruction." I forwarded the entire packet to Briggs and Cole. By Monday morning, Diane Hargrove and 1 board member had been arrested. The footage of her being walked to a squad car in a pale pink cardigan played on every local channel. No sunglasses this time. The remaining board members scrambled. They called for an emergency community meeting at the clubhouse, first time it had been used for anything serious in years. I went. Gerald insisted we attend as a block. The room was packed. Dozens of residents, some who hadn't exchanged words in years, jammed onto folding chairs. At the front, the remaining board members looked more like defendants than leaders. A wiry man named Craig, who'd always seemed vaguely nervous even before the scandal, stepped to the mic. "We understand that recent events have shaken the community. We're cooperating fully with law enforcement and are looking to appoint interim leadership until formal elections can be held." A woman in the third row stood up immediately. "How do we know the rest of you weren't in on it?" Murmurs rolled through the room. "You all signed those checks," someone shouted from the back. Craig fumbled. "We didn't know the funds were being diverted." Diane handled most of the finances. Gerald stood beside me. "That's not a defense. You approved a construction project on someone else's private property. You never verified the boundaries, never notified the homeowner, and then tried to punish him for pushing back." I stepped forward. "There's a motion. Dissolve the current board. Appoint a temporary trustee panel from homeowners who've never served. Hold a supervised special election with a third-party mediator." Craig looked like he wanted to dissolve through the floor. "We don't have the authority to—" "You lost your authority when you let a con artist run the show." Someone cut in from the back. A vote was called on the spot. Out of nearly 60 homeowners present, 2 abstained. The rest voted to remove the seated board immediately. Gerald was elected interim trustee by a landslide. I was named oversight coordinator mostly because people figured I already had the receipts. They weren't wrong. Over the following week, we launched a full financial audit. What we found would have made a banker flinch. Gym equipment purchased and never installed. Landscaping contracts billed twice for the same work. A playground renovation fully paid for that was never touched. Over $70,000 gone in 18 months. Every missing dollar was documented and handed to the auditor's office. Refunds were negotiated. The state froze the HOA's accounts and appointed a special financial monitor. New bylaws were drafted, full transparency requirements, mandatory homeowner votes on capital projects, a rotating review council. The dock lumber? I donated every last plank to a local veterans fishing program. They built a floating dock on public land, fully permitted, with a small plaque attached. Donated by the residents of Cedarwood Pines. Built with reclaimed dignity. A month later, I stood on my clean shoreline and watched the sun rise over the lake. No dock, no drama, just diesel beside me, tail sweeping steadily. For the first time in a long time, it felt like home again. Gerald knocked just past sunrise, holding a folded newspaper and 2 coffees. "Back page," he said. The headline: DA considers additional charges in Cedarwood Pines HOA scandal. Beneath it, a photo of a man I didn't recognize. The caption: former HOA treasurer, Clifton Marsh. "Turns out he was in deeper than anyone thought," Gerald said, settling into the chair by the window. "The auditor traced more than half the missing funds to a private brokerage account under a false name. Frozen yesterday." According to the article, Marsh had been quietly siphoning reserve funds for months. Diane's dock scheme had just been the visible edge of something much rotten underneath. "And the best part," Gerald said, leaning forward, "he tried to claim he was only moving the money temporarily to diversify HOA assets." I laughed short and sharp. "How's that holding up?" He said it during a deposition. The DA's office flagged it as evidence of intent. They're building a criminal conspiracy case. Wire fraud, falsification of public records, misuse of fiduciary authority. What had started as 30 feet of stolen lakefront had unraveled into a full-scale financial scandal. Later that week, the new oversight committee held its first open session. I stood at the front with 2 volunteers, a fire marshal named Tamara and a high school principal named Wesley. The room was packed, the energy focused and deliberate. Wesley brought up a spreadsheet on the projector. "We've recovered just over $24,000 in misappropriated funds. Another $19,000 is pending seizure from Marsh's account." A woman in the back raised her hand. "Are we pressing charges as a community?" Tamara nodded. "The county prosecutor is handling criminal charges. We're also filing a civil suit on behalf of all affected residents. Unauthorized expenditures, fraudulent billing, deceptive governance." A man in a blue jacket stood. "What about last year's dues increase? They said it was for irrigation. Nothing got fixed." I pulled up an audit image, a check made out to Green Valley Landscaping, a company dissolved 5 years earlier. That was a front, I said. The money was rerouted through a dummy vendor. It's all in the fraud claims. A soft-spoken woman named Brenda looked shaken. I trusted them. I thought they were actually keeping this place together. Gerald, seated in the front row, turned toward her. That's what these people count on. But not anymore. Not here. We left with a signed petition from over 70% of homeowners, formally authorizing the committee to act on their behalf. The next day, I met with the county prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elizabeth Garner. We have enough to indict on multiple counts, she said, flipping through a binder that could have doubled as a doorstop. But here's the real kicker. Marsh tried to wire funds overseas 3 days before the audit began. The transfer was flagged. That's premeditated financial flight. He's looking at prison time. And Diane, she signed off on everything. She's going to have a very hard time claiming she didn't know what she was doing. I shook my head. All over a dock. No, she said. The dock was just the move that exposed everything else. You pulled the thread. Others were afraid to touch it. 2 weeks later, the indictments dropped. Diane Hargrove. Conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of public records, misuse of homeowner funds. Clifton Marsh. Wire fraud. Attempted financial flight. Obstruction of justice. 2 additional board members. Misdemeanor charges for negligence and failure to report known wrongdoing. The courtroom was standing room only. I sat between Gerald and Brenda. Diane's face was blank as the charges were read aloud. Marsh looked like he hadn't slept since the arrest. The judge didn't soften it. This court takes the deliberate betrayal of public trust seriously. The evidence before us reflects not poor judgment, but a calculated abuse of authority for personal gain. Bail was denied for both. Outside the courthouse, reporters chased down anyone with a document. A few recognized me. I gave no statements. There was nothing left to say. Back at the lake, the water was calm. The shoreline was healing, new grass filling in where the dock posts had torn up the earth. That evening, Tamara, Wesley, Brenda, and a few others came by with folding chairs and cold drinks. Nobody announced it. They just showed up. Wesley raised his cup. To Mason, who reminded us that one person standing up can make the rest of us remember how to. I held mine up. To everyone who stopped looking the other way. The sun dipped low, casting gold across the water. Diesel curled at my feet. Nobody mentioned the dock. Not because they'd forgotten, but because they didn't need to. It had become the symbol of something bigger than 30 feet of lumber. Its removal had cleared more than just wood and nails from my shoreline. It had cleared the path forward,